Live. Okay. Hello, everybody. Welcome to Community Coffee. Yes, this is CosmoQuest. You have not stumbled into something completely different, a new channel. I am Gillian. You've seen me around on the Discord for a few weeks at least. And when Dr. Pamela said she wanted to try something new with the community coffee, I thought it would be an interesting opportunity to kind of talk about all the different ways that space and art cross over, because in my mind they just cross over in every possible way. And I just thought it would be really interesting to kind of make a series to look at all those different crossovers. And I'm really excited for today, which is the first session, because it's about my field, which is dance and choreography, and I get to talk to somebody about it. So I'm joined with Paul Sutter, who you guys probably know, and he was a consultant actually on a space or astrophysics-based ballet by Siren Modern Dance called TikTok. And I am just super excited to talk about this project. And I'm also a bit confused because I haven't been able to really find anything about it on the internet. So, but thank you so much for joining me, Paul.
Oh, it's so glad. I'm so glad to be here. So excited to talk about this project, and really nice to meet you, actually.
Thank you. So yeah, let's just kind of jump into it. And my first question is just how did you get involved in this project? How did this come about?
Right. So I'm an astrophysicist, as you mentioned, and I first met the co-artistic directors of Siren Modern Dance, Kate St. Amon and Lynn Peterson, almost 3 years ago. And at the time, I was living in Columbus, Ohio, working at The Ohio State University. And I had just finished working with a local dance company in Columbus, a contemporary dance company, on a production there involving science and art. And I was sitting around thinking about new projects, getting a little itch for a new collaboration because that project had just wound down. And unbeknownst to me, Kate and Lynn from Siren Modern Dance, based in New York City, they had just finished their own science and dance project exploring the nature of quantum mechanics. And that project was winding down and they were looking for new opportunities. But they were still showing that production called Red and Blue, Bitter and Sweet. And they were emailing everybody in the science community that they could find to see if they could host a performance of that project. And at that time at Ohio State, we were hosting a big international conference in particle physics and cosmology, and we were putting everything together, and all the advertisements had gone out, and we were accepting reservations and all that. And Kate and Lynn reached out to my boss, my department chair at Ohio State, saying, hey, we've got this thing. You have a big conference. Would you like to host us? And he replied to them saying, sorry, we don't have a budget for performances, but we've got a guy in our department that we need. And so he made the introduction. A couple weeks later, I was in New York just coincidentally for a TV shoot. And so I got to stop by their studio, and they did a rehearsal that I got to watch of this quantum physics-based project. Absolutely fell in love with it, fell in love with the directors and the dancers and the whole project and their attitude and their approach. And just we kicked it off. We had a bunch of meetings, a bunch of phone calls. I went back to New York a couple times for various work projects. And over the course of a year, we shaped this idea that we now call TikTok. That is the name of our production. And this is a dance, a modern dance exploring the nature of time. And this is something that just Kate and Lynn were always fascinated by. This is something that has a lot of mysteries. This is something that has a lot of physics and science to it, but also a lot of heart and human experience. So it's like the perfect place for a cool intersection. And we started production on TikTok about a year and a half ago. I started coming to New York very regularly to stay in rehearsals, and ended up not just consulting for it and answering emails and questions, but I'm also now the narrator of the performance. And I work with the dancers. I'm on stage with them. I get moved around. It's pretty awesome. And we had our first showing about a year ago at Bryant Park. And since then, I've moved to New York City. And so now I was able to show up to a lot more rehearsals than when I was living in Columbus. And we've had performances around the United States and more on the slate to come.
That's super cool. And there's a lot of kind of boring choreographic questions that I want to ask, but just backing up a little bit, that you had already done a science based dance. When did you start science together?
I think this, the first project I did, it was called Song of the Stars, and it was based in Columbus. But we also did a Kickstarter campaign, and the film, we did a film of it, and that film went on PBS Memories nationwide. And I think I first got the bug, I would say 5 or 6 years ago, when I was starting to do a lot more outreach, when I was starting to communicate with a lot more audiences. And when I realized that there were audiences who would never show up to my podcast or never watch me on TV or never buy my book or anything like that. And I wanted to reach them. I wanted to share science with them in a way that made sense to them. And so I started reaching out to artists of all kinds, visual arts, performing arts, everything. And with just bouncing ideas off and say, hey, I'm an astrophysicist. I've got all these ideas. There's lots of cool stories. What do you got? And the only people to get back to me were dancers. And so it naturally evolved. I worked with Seven Dance Company in Columbus, Ohio for the first project. And then I'm so glad I got connected to Siren Modern Dance here in New York.
Huh, that's interesting. I feel proud of the other dancers that are interested in this project and working with it, kind of blending it together. So it sounds like with this particular project, with TikTok though, that you were really kind of there from the beginning to the end, that you were really part of the development, and so just kind of what was that like in the development? So you kind of made the idea first and then started working with the dancers, or were you kind of there during rehearsals, or how did that all work?
Yeah, it started once we landed on the idea of exploring time might be a cool idea. We, Lynn, Kate, and I would have a bunch of phone calls, a bunch of email exchanges. They started devouring books. They started listening to my podcast and the content I had produced about this subject, started emailing and calling back and forth, just generating ideas, letting them explore this topic. And then what kicked off the rehearsal process is we won a grant from the Ohio State University to bring the entire company from New York to Columbus for a 1-week workshop. And we spent an entire week locked in the same room. All we had to go on was emails from me to Kate and Lynn. Kate is the choreographer of the piece. She had sketched out a bunch of ideas at home, but hadn't really tested it on the dancers yet. And that week we spent really germinating how this collaboration would shape out. And what Kate did is she would give me a prompt, like say, tell me about relativity. And she would have me walk around the space, just ad-libbing thoughts off the top of my head about relativity and letting the dancers respond to that, just individually or pairing up or just listening to the words and the cadence and the thoughts and moving to that. Then Kate took her own ideas, her own thoughts, watched what the dancers were responding to and how their bodies were naturally moving to these words, blended it together. She knew what music, it's Mozart. So she had the piece, she knew the music, and then she took all those pieces together to create the dance. And then at the same time, I started writing my narration. And the piece opens with 10 minutes of narration by me with the dancers. So I'm moving with the dancers, they are picking me up, I'm interacting with them. And then it goes into the musical section. And then there's a break in the middle where I come back on stage, but this time the music is still going. And so I'm speaking with the music, with the dance for another 10-minute piece. And then another musical section. And so we just wove that all together, starting with that 1 week in Columbus a year and a half ago. And then I would come back to New York about twice a month to continue to flesh out the narration, to continue to work with them, to answer questions. It was a very, very deep and intense collaboration.
Yeah, it sounds like it. I think it's, it's a choreographer's dream, to be honest, to be able to spend that much time developing something and really like building it up from the beginning. So I know that if it were me, it'd just be like absolutely the dream. So the narration, is it kind of explaining the concepts, or is it more like a story based, or what's that kind of?
Yeah. So the first narration, the first section, the one we wrote first, is exploring what we know about the nature of time through science. So
Okay.
concepts like relativity, like entropy and thermodynamics and the arrow of time and um, how it appears to be absolute, how we can't travel back into the past, but we don't know why. So just really just exploring that. There's a couple small stories within that section, but it's very explanatory.
Okay.
The second part is much more, which we wrote later, is much more about the human experience of time and our frustration of experience knowing time and being able to sense time, but not really having the words to explain it, not really knowing what it's all about, questioning why. Why is it that we remember the past but not the future? Why is it that we must go into our futures but we can't go into the past? Relating to themes of love and loss and death and anticipation of all those human elements. So the second piece, the second narration works really well with the music because it's much more emotional and thoughtful.
Right. Yeah, it's interesting. I've seen the trailer that they have on their YouTube, and it's meant to be very exciting, and it's very you can tell that it's about time because you have people looking at their wristwatches. Um, so it's kind of a very like I guess like an obvious visual cue that it's about time. But I think it doesn't show that kind of depth of the experience of time in that little trailer. So I guess I haven't seen the piece. I'd love to, but kind of have you seen a video of it? I mean, I know that when you're in a piece, it's very hard to judge the result of it, but if you've seen a video, like what did you think about it? Like, can you see the aspects of time and the science involved in it, or yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's modern dance. This is not supposed to be like dancers moving around as a minute hand on the clock or
Right. Yeah.
yeah, but but what I see is from the collaborative process, the words I used or very early on in the collaboration, I see that brought to life. And Kate is very smart. She's a very good, excellent choreographer. She, during my narration parts where I'm speaking about time, you can see the dancers will move in certain ways in to reflect my words. And
Okay.
those little motifs appear throughout the dance to help anchor the audience and call back to some of the words I've said. But there's a lot to explore and understand about time than just through words or through concrete concepts. There's a lot to explore about the nature of time just through movement and through emotion and through feeling and things that we can't necessarily put into words. And so a lot of the dance explores that side, like using my narration to really dig deep into the science and threading that science throughout the piece, but then using the dance to explore all sorts of aspects of time that are not known by science, that we don't understand, that we can't really conceptualize. And so the purpose of the piece is to watch the dance and to start reflecting on your own memory, on your own future, on your own relationships.
That's really interesting. Yeah, I mean, dance is an abstract form, so you can't, having the narration there obviously helps, but other ways it's very difficult to make something that's clear enough. But the choreographic motifs that return, that's good choreography right there. So it helps people understand what they saw. So in total, it was what, like 40, 50 minutes about?
Yeah, the entire production is around 45 minutes. That includes both the music and the narration. We have performed it at several science centers, including the Boston Museum of Science, the Houston Museum of Natural Science. We've done the Bryant Park performance. There are more performances around the corner as soon as this whole COVID-19 thing blows over and
I
dancers
was
can have
gonna say, what, you
audiences
haven't, you're
again.
not doing a virtual streaming event
We're
yet?
not doing a virtual streaming event. We actually talked about it. But just the logistics and the experience, this is meant to be a live performance. We do have videos of our performances at Bryant Park and at Boston, and they're good and they're good for promotion, but this piece is meant to be felt and experienced live.
As dance must be. That's one of, yeah, that this is something that I am struggling badly with this quarantine.
Oh, yes.
Is the inability to perform and be on stage in front of
Oh, yeah.
people.
I mean, Siren Dance, they haven't even had rehearsals for over 2 months.
Right. Yeah.
Because they're based in New York and they just can't gather. So they do Zoom meetings where they go over certain key phrases or they just stay connected. But it'll take a while for the dance world to warm back up.
Yeah, for sure. So have you seen this piece? I mean, after you performed it the first time, again, it's a boring choreographic question, but after the first performance, and I guess it's been a few months since then, have you seen it continue to develop and change the more you perform it?
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's a living thing. No, especially live performance is never static. So it's not, the bulk of it is the same. It is, I would say it's done much better now because we've done it a bunch more times and we've
Right.
practiced it more. And so it's just smoother and cleaner and we know our marks better and we know our lines better and everything and the move better. But we tweak. We did watch the videos and also just when you perform it in a rehearsal space, it may feel one way, and then you're in front of a few hundred people and you do it, and all of a sudden that exact same thing just doesn't feel right. You assume that there's going to be a certain energy or feedback from the audience and they don't get it or it doesn't click. And so you can feel it on stage. You're like, okay, I guess that needs a little bit of tweaking, or that didn't line up right, or that didn't look good up on a stage when it did look good in a studio. So we've continually made little tweaks like that, little tweaks to the narration, tweaks to the dance, cleanups, improvements. That's one of the beauties of live performance, is that you never, ever quite see the same thing twice.
Yeah, absolutely. And had you performed before this? Was it your first time kind of being on stage?
I've done speaking, I've done TED Talks, and in Song of the Stars, I narrated that too. But in that, I was separate from the dancers. So I wasn't really interacting with them. I had my spot on the stage where I delivered my lines, and then it would cut and then go to the dance and then cut back to me. And this is definitely the first time I've been on stage with not just words to memorize, but marks and positions and body movements and hand positions and having one dancer's hand to pick them up and then another dancer lifts up my arm at a certain cue. That was definitely very, very new for me, very challenging, but also a lot of fun.
Yeah. There's a question from the chat.
Yeah.
Nancy was wondering if there were any ad-lib moments during the performance that have wound their way into the permanent performance now.
There are definitely ad-lib moments in the early choreographing stage that ended up we're just playing around, we're listening to the music, we're listening to the words, the dancers discover something and say, oh wow, that felt really good. Kate is seeing it from the outside and says, oh yeah, ad-libbing because it's set to the music. And if one of the dancers or me decides to go off and do their own thing, the other dancers who depend on that other dancer being in the right position at the right time, they're gonna miss it. They're gonna miss a mark, they're gonna miss a handhold, they're gonna miss a partnering opportunity. And so it can go off the rails quickly. That said, sometimes during the performances we've seen like, I put my, one of the dancers puts their arm like this instead of like this. And then we said, oh, that actually looks a little bit better. We should have thought of that a few months ago. So always little tweaks like that.
Right. I was thinking when I was preparing for this session, I was thinking about, astrophysics on the surface doesn't really seem like that good of a crossover because astronomy is dealing with mostly spherical objects in vast distances of space and differences of mass and density, which humans cannot. We're not spherical, we're not far from each other, we're not very different in mass and density. So it's very kind of difficult when you think about it in that way. But what kind of other aspects of astrophysics and astronomy do you think would fit well into dance and you might want to see someday become the next ballet?
Yeah, I've two answers for that. One is that there's astrophysics, like physics, is all about movement and energy and momentum, which is, and forces and reactions, which are the exact same language of the dancer. So there is so much movement and vitality and action and dynamism happening in the universe, from the growth of the universe itself to the death of massive stars to the formation of planets. There's a lot going on in a very, very complicated and intricate and interesting ways. Hence, astrophysics is an entire field of science.
Right.
The other angle to that is that there are a lot of stories out there. There are a lot of metaphors out there. There are a lot of ways that we can look at astrophysical systems or things in physics and really use it as an inspiration point for art. So from Song of the Stars, that was the direction that Song of the Stars leaned into, which was, instead of talking about planets forming around a star, we're going to talk about a mother to just experiencing life with several newborn children. Instead of a planetary nebula, we're going to explore an aging artist who is creating one last masterpiece before they finally die. So like drawing out these metaphors to really understand the astrophysics in a new way and to understand ourselves in a new way. I'm working on right now, I'm working with a director and a composer, and we're making an opera about black holes. And yes, it's about black holes. It's also about a lot of other things.
Right. Um, that's fascinating. So do you think if you could, I mean, consult or develop or work on, a new ballet or dance about, any sort of topic, astrophysical topic, what would it be?
I'm honestly open to anything. I've explored in my own work, in my podcasts and articles and TV shows. I've explored so many cool topics, and it seems like I fall in love with each one, from the rings of Saturn to Earth-like planets around red dwarfs to colliding galaxies. It's all beautiful out there. It's worth storytelling adventure. So whenever I partner with an artist, the first thing I do is I list like a dozen things. Like here's a dozen things that I'm interested in, and let them pick. And we have a conversation around that, and to explore what they are interested in, what they're interested in developing, what they think their audiences might appreciate, what might be most fruitful for their medium, and it's a really fun collaborative process.
Nice. There are a couple of people asking in the chat. One is Arcatufus, sorry, not Arcturus, Arcatufus, I think. I'm sorry, I'm mangling your name. Anyway, he's asking, will you host a virtual event again soon?
Right, good question. In the past couple weeks, I've done some live webinars for the Simons Foundation, for the Boston Museum of Science. There aren't any coming up in the next week or so, but this summer there might be some on the horizon. My weekly radio show every Thursday night at 8 p.m. It's called Space Radio. It's on Twitch and YouTube. Go to spaceradioshow.com. So I'll be there tonight.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, I saw that you had an event, but it was in the middle of the night for me, so I not.
And I see in the chat, lots of people are asking about these. I also talk about cheese on my radio show that is supposed to be devoted to space and science. I also end up talking about cheese.
Space Radio / Cheese Club.
Yes.
Yeah, and AstroWise was asking if you've been rehearsing online during this period, or
we haven't. So the Siren Dance Company, they've been getting together regularly, once or twice a week, to go over key phrases. But there's a lot of the rehearsal, or there's a lot of the performance that relies on partnering, or that relies on one dancer moving off another or working with another. And if you're just spread out in a virtual session, you might be able to practice a solo part, but you're not going to be able to practice any kind of partnering. And a large fraction of the performance is based on partnering and relationships among the dancers. So they at least stay connected. They at least stay together as a company, but we're going to have to wait for the lockdowns to ease before they start getting together regularly in the studio.
Right. Yeah, I used to, before my current incarnation, I was dancing for a company in South Korea, and everything was all about, like, there was really very little choreographed about our pieces. It was all about responding to the other people around you, and, you get a stimulus from someone and then immediately translate it into something else. And I can't imagine trying to even think about that in an online way, because by the time you take it from a computer screen and respond to it, like, the moment is absolutely gone. But hopefully things will get better soon. There is one last thing that I wanted to ask, which is kind of a bit on a different area, literally, which is that, there's so much that you were saying, there's so many stories to tell, there's so many metaphors, I'm even thinking about, significant people in history and astronomers, and if we can make ballets on fairy tales, and we can make ballets on, Galileo versus,
right.
These kind of things. But do you think that at some point, right now it's all science experiments and figuring out how we survive in microgravity, but do you think at some point we'll see dance move off Earth, as humans seem to be moving off Earth? What kind of dance will, if at all, come with us?
Oh yeah, I'm sure 200 years from now there'll be a whole field of zero gravity dance or low gravity dance. Uh, you know, movement is fundamental to humans, and dance is fundamental as a expression of human art. So wherever humans are and however humans as long as humans continue to be humans and express themselves, dance will always be with us. And I'm very curious of where it will go in the future. um, I was able to find a video of the Bryant Park performance. This is one we did 1 year ago. It was an outdoor performance in New York City. We don't want to watch the whole thing because it's 45 minutes long, but if you'd like, I can. The link itself, I see Pamela is asking for the link. The link itself is private because this is a live performance that the dance company is trying to sell for other performances. And so they keep it. They don't just like post links to the video online. But I can, if you'd like, do a screen share of like the first 10 minutes narration if you guys are up for it. It's my ego is not attached to it at all.
I mean, I would love that. I don't know. Dr. Pamela is running production, so she'll have to say
Pamela's
if that's
in
a
charge.
possibility or not.
It's a possibility. I think I can screen share and do it. Okay. All right. Pamela is scurrying in the background. I'm all set to share my screen. So what it'd be fill up my view. And then I believe I can just pipe the computer audio out to you guys. This is a live test. If it works, it will be magical. But Pamela is working in the background.
Cool. Yes, so while she's working, I'll just kind of give the listeners a little bit. So I've been thinking about this session, the space art crossovers, and figuring out what I want to do with it. And I'm really open for ideas and suggestions. I've thought of everything from more interviews like this, talking to artists about their process. Dr. Pamela had suggested at some point bringing on artists to do demonstrations of their works, kind of like a morning show. I was thinking about digging into some different aspects. We can, fiction or space art, art illustration. Every time I look through an article, it's you don't see the actual picture of something. You see the artist's interpretation of it, and the kind of that whole process. So I'm even kind of to more philosophical look at it, where I was reading a book recently about how the beauty is like mathematical as well, because of the elegance and the simplicity, which is a definition of beauty, as well as something colorful, and just some of these kind of crossovers. So if you have ideas or things you want to see, please let me know. Because I think it's this whole idea is something that I'm really passionate about. I'm really interested to see what I can kind of create from it. So Dr. Pamela is ready with this screen share.
All right.
And
I think, I'll do it. What I'm going to show is the first 10 minutes of the performance, which is my narration. There's no music here, just me talking with dancers. It is in New York City, so you hear ambulances and cars and like people yelling randomly because it was an outdoor performance in New York last year. So here we go. This is going to be amazing if it works. Did it work?
I do.
Oh, wow. Okay, it worked. Yeah, so that was the opening monologue for TikTok.
That's awesome. I love how it's kind of, it's, you know, there's so much going on. It's not just the dance and the visuals, but it's very poetic as well.
Mhm.
Um,
Yeah, they're a wonderful company to work with. And also, after performing outdoors, we now demand a wind machine to make all the outfits blow perfectly. That was an extra special treat, just constant movement.
Yeah, you know, performing outside is like you have different elements. You lack the lights, but then you get all the extra, you know, kind of extra
Hmm, hmm.
energy and that, awesome. Well, thank you so much for showing it. I'm gonna let you go
Oh,
off
I'm
to your
glad I could. I'm glad I could.
yes. Thank you for joining me, and you know, I'll let you go off to your day. I have to go off to dinner.
Right.
But this has been really, really interesting, and I just it's been a pleasure. Thank you so
All
much.
right. Thank you so much for inviting me on, and good luck to you and to Dr. Pamela.
Thank you. Um, I will just say that to the people who have followed and subscribed, I didn't necessarily see all of them. I do not have dogs. I do not have cats. I do not have furniture for that matter. And I don't have Cheerios, but I can give you a little happy dance. Do a thank you happy dance. Um, this community coffee is part of it's a production of CosmoQuest, and CosmoQuest is a product of the Planetary Science Institute. So thank you so much for being part of this, and I hope to do this again maybe next week. And again, if you have ideas, let me know. So thank you for being part of this with me.